In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I resolved two wiring issues on my BMW Z3. Hello and a very warm welcome to another video from AutoNight. Now, when I set out to work on this car to resolve a couple of wiring issues that I had, I thought it was going to be a pretty straightforward and quick fix. Little did I know. Now, I'm going to have to admit fairly early on in this that I did cock up. And it might seem like a very minor error, but you'll go on to understand how my little error really did lead me up the garden path. There were two wiring issues with this car, and for those who haven't been following this, I'm going to keep it really simple. Someone had run an external wire between the differential speed sensor at the back and the instrument housing inside the car. It had been run under the car, through the engine bay and through a grommet on the bulkhead. And this is not the way to do it, so that had to be fixed. The other problem was with the convertible roof. You should have to have your foot on the brake in order to operate the convertible roof, and that's not the case with this car. It was the other way around. If you put your foot on the brake, it stopped the roof from working. That wasn't right. Somebody had cut a wire at the switch, behind the switch, in the center console, and added an ignition live from the radio wiring to the switch. All very strange. And when I looked at the wiring diagram, I genuinely could not work out how it could work with a live feed added there. Now, I printed off wiring diagrams at work. I was showing colleagues and saying, look at this, how can it work with a feed there? And those that know wiring diagrams, not many people do, it's a bit like reading music. You either know because you've been trained or you don't. But those who could read the wiring diagram said it shouldn't work with the feed there. And I said, no, it shouldn't. And I wasted hours looking at it. I thought I was going to go insane at one point. Now here is the wiring diagram. 2 pages of it, electro-hydraulic convertible top. And this is the switch in the console. Now I thought the brown and red wire here had been cut, about here, and then a 12-volt feed had simply been added here. Turns out, the wire that had actually been cut was the brown and orange, and the feed had been added there instead. So it was my error, because the brown and orange and the brown and red look very similar. So you may be watching this and thinking, oh my god, what a schoolboy error. And I don't genuinely know how it happened. I know I'm not colourblind, but I guess maybe I'm just rushing because there's a lot to do on this car and I just want to get things done and push content. So running that additional wire between the switch and the relay to replace the brown and red made no difference whatsoever and was an absolute waste of time. Now fortunately I needed to go in there and run the other wire anyway for the differential, so all is not lost. I've now just got this wire, I mean one day I might need it, but it just runs from the boot to the center console and it does nothing. It's just sealed at both ends and that's it, so it's there. So here is some footage of me stripping out the interior console and running those wires in, even though one of them was utterly pointless. And if you're wondering what was actually wrong with the hood, well, I'll be telling you about that in a minute. Yes, it's a bloody mess in here. The seats are held in by two 13mm nuts at the front, and there are two 16mm bolts at the back. You've got wiring here that has to be disconnected for the seat electrics. That's the movement of the seat, the motors. And then you've also got connectors here, and this relates to the seatbelt pretensioner. Just a word of warning, you'd certainly want to disconnect the battery before you start messing about with this, or it will bring on a warning light when you switch the ignition on, as it will sense there is a problem. The center console isn't as bad as it looks. Yes, it's responsible for all of this, but I guess there is a bit of reaching around inside. Essentially, it's just lots and lots of good old-fashioned Phillips screws, and once you've worked out where they all are and undone them, then it's no big deal really. This wiring passes along under here and across, ultimately up, and it disappears through a grommet underneath the rear shelf carpet there and goes into the boot. For the next reason, I need to take you around to the other side. This black cable here goes to the speedometer instrument housing, and it is routed up through the grommet for the bonnet cable, and not really through the bonnet cable grommet, but actually around it, meaning that that grommet cannot be seated, and that cable then goes all the way across here, re-emerges, passes down along the fuel lines of the car, and then connects via this rather spurious connector to the speed sensor on the diff. So again, it will need to get to the back of the car, and then it will pass up through here with all the other wires. It then separates off in this corner, and that section of the loom comes off and goes through the boot floor here. Bearing in mind the diff's down here somewhere, it then goes under the car to the diff. I've placed all the fixings for the centre console and the seats in one convenient place so I can keep them safe. And I'm now going to take everything out of the car so I can clean this properly. Now, whilst this is by no means perfect, it's much cleaner because I don't want to be working in an environment of filth. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention earlier, the seat belt has to be disconnected from the seat base as well. It's a 16mm bolt there. So the plan now is to run these wires, and what I want to do is to get this side of the carpet kind of up and work out a routing for them. I'm not sure how much I'm going to have to remove here at the back to access the point where the grommet is, which I think is just in there. It'd be nice if I could just remove that rear sort of load cover thing there, rear bulkhead cover, and if once this is removed I can find a way of threading it through behind here. To start with, I need to get this sill panel out of the way. Now I've been able to lift this carpet up enough and release it enough to establish the pathways for various wiring looms. I am not sure what that is there. I know this car was fitted with a tracker from new. I wonder if that's it. I've never seen a tracker in my life, so I don't know what it looks like. Motorola, that's a sign. No corrosion in here though, it's just good to see. I mean, this is the sort of rearmost extremity of the sill from the inside perspective. All looking good. So I think I'm going to run some new wires along here, across here, and then up where it can hopefully go through into the boot. I've got 2 reels of automotive cable here. I've gone for 2 different colours simply because I'm going to be running them alongside each other and I want to differentiate between the two. I'm going to use the green for the hood switch, and I'm going to use the red for the wiring between the instrument housing and the speedo sensor in the diff. I allow plenty of slack when I do anything like this, so there's plenty of wire at each end. I'm beginning in here. I'm going to pass these 2 wires through together through this loom. So to give an idea, these 2 wires here continue down here and along. If I lift up this carpet here, you can see the full routing across. I've cable tied and involved them in the main loom, and they then disappear off under this stretch of carpet, re-emerge here. This green one will ultimately hook up here and take the place of this feed from the radio. Meantime, this red wire is going to make its way across up to the dash insert. Meanwhile, in the back here, I've moved aside some of this carpet for the rear bulkhead, which moves very easily, and we can now see the big grommet where everything goes through into the boot. I have bound these 2 cables together at the other end with some insulation tape just to make it a bit stiffer, and then hopefully I can get this through, feed this through the gap. Now the thing is, will this follow and end up in the rear area? So I've had to be a little bit imaginative, and I actually fed a coat hanger through the other side first. Now I've hooked up this wire to it, and I'm now going to pull that back through. Finally it's through. That wasn't too annoying, was it? So it's nicely routed up there, and I need just to pull that through. What I'm actually going to do is coat the area of cable in fabric tape where it goes through that gap, so it's really secure. It's all done, and it goes up through there and re-emerges there. Now I've got to get that through the grommet into the boot. I'm going to strip out this boot so the carpet is clear of all the areas that I need to access. With this trim down, I'm now going to remove this CD auto changer. That was fun to wrestle out. The CD auto changer is unbolted and it's got this Harman card-on. Glad it's that way around. Sound system. Probably a little bit wasted on 25-year-old speakers, to be fair. Need to disconnect this and get this out of the way. With everything removed from the boot, you can now see the underside of that grommet, and the trick is going to be to feed that wire through here. In terms of feeding the cables through into the boot, I was expecting to have to make another hole in this large grommet, but looking at where those two hydraulic lines go through, there is a gap and it'll fit neatly through there. Very neat, I'm really happy with that. So this is where the two wires branch off, and the green wire has made its home in this loom here, and it will now come up here where we will cut and join it to this. Meantime, this red wire will be making its way home towards differential through here. Back in the car now, and I'm going to remove this yellow link wire from the radio wiring to the hood switch. One of my worst kinds of electrical connector there. Very unreliable. And the only downside is it does damage the insulation as well, so I'll just put some tape around that. A little bit of insulation tape around that, and now I'm just going to bind this together with some fabric tape. I always find this cloth tape to be a really neat solution for tidying up wiring. So that's the radio wiring reinstated now, so nothing's being taken off this wiring now to power anything else. So I can just put that to one side. So here we have a nice soldered joint, and we can just pass the heat shrink over that and then melt that into position. Lovely, neat job. Back to the hood. So what was it? Well, I decided to reinstate the original wiring, so I got rid of the ignition live feed from the radio wiring, disconnected it, did away with it, and I reconnected the two brown and orange wires. Proper connection. I soldered them, I heat shrink them. In fact, I used so much heat shrink on this car that I've had to buy a whole new load more. What a beautiful array of heat shrink. But with that reinstated, I checked out the hood operation, and to my surprise, the hood worked correctly, with your foot on the brake as it should, and then it stopped working, and it was really intermittent. So I kept mucking about with it, trying to get it to work, and sometimes it would, and sometimes it wouldn't. And then I suddenly thought, there were a bag of bits with this car. It's like a few spares in the boot when I bought it, and one of them was a new switch. I say new, it's actually second hand. And I fitted it. And it worked perfectly. Every time. And I've tested it, I've been out in it, I've driven it, and it works. So this is actually the one I took out of the car. So the other one's in there now. And this, I think, is defective. So all that over a bloody switch. And I am very pleased to report that I now have the correct wiring plug on the differential. And as you can see here, the grommet for the bonnet cable is now correctly located in its hole in the bulkhead. No water can get in there now. The centre console was properly cleaned. Additionally, this centre section of this fake wood was standing proud by about 5mm across here, and it turned out when I dismantled it that it had separated from the backing, so I rebonded that, clamped it tight overnight to set, and then refitted it. And now there's a much better fit. Not perfect, but it is a 90s car after all. Fit and finish has come a long way since those days. So the whole thing turned out to be an absolute saga really, and I was a bit at the end of my tether with it. And then suddenly there was a ray of sunshine, the light at the end of the tunnel, and I was very happy that it was fixed. So I reinstated all the trims in the driver's footwell. I'd left them off for a while because I was waiting for the throttle cable as well, but that's still back ordered. There's no sign of that at the moment, so I thought let's get it back together. It's much nicer driving it with those trims in place, and it's easy enough to remove them. So that's it for this video. I'm actually very happy at this point because it feels like I've got two really annoying things sorted out, things that had really been getting on my nerves, and it's something else I can cross off the list. Coming soon, I'm going to be carrying out a power steering fluid change. And additionally, I'm going to be removing this scuttle trim to clean out the drains. I haven't washed this car since I got it because I want to make sure those are clear first so no water collects in that chamber. I've ordered all new clips because these get brittle, and I've also ordered a roll of butyl cord because there is a seal under here. Here is my butyl cord. So those are just a couple of videos that are in the pipeline. Meantime, thank you very much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in another video very soon. Thank you and goodbye.